Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Ryan, aka Ryantist the Scientist. I am on a mission to empower and inspire everyone with knowledge and fervor of the natural world. Maybe you have some questions, and that's great. I'm here to answer them for you. So let's do that together here on another episode of Ryantist the Scientist. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the inaugural episode of Ryantist the Scientist. Don't forget to subscribe to the show and to follow it on all of the social media platforms and wherever you listen to your podcasts. So let's just dive right into this first episode of the show. I have a question today from Gracie, who called in and left a message. So let's just go ahead and turn it over to her.
Hi, my name is Gracie Bertini, and I have a question. If you could share with us 3 approachable action steps that we can each take to help protect the environment that we can incorporate in our day-to-day. Okay, thank you.
So the reason that I think that this is such a good question, and thank you again, Gracie, for calling in, is because it gives the opportunity to highlight the importance of action, and that, in the face of a constant and seemingly never-ending barrage of negative conversation and reporting about climate change and the environment and pollution and toxins that have been released. There's a lot of stuff going on, and that's important to accept and to know and to have out there. But it's also important to know that there are actionable things that we can do as individuals to make improvements in a lot of different ways. So the easiest thing to do for that sense of instant gratification of I would like to do something, so I'm going to do something, is to volunteer. So when it's difficult to incorporate this into like your every single day routine, but it's not impossible to incorporate volunteerism into your routine. So to get started with something like this, the easiest actionable thing to do would be to set aside and take 20 minutes worth of time to look up volunteer groups, grassroots organizations, conservancies, land trusts, environmental organizations, etc., and go and check out their websites and look for if they have a volunteer page and check it out. See what they're doing. A lot of organizations have both short-term and long-term volunteer projects and opportunities that people can get involved in. And where we live, Gracie and I, in New York, there's a really, really good organization called the Billion Oyster Project. And I really, really like them. And I think that this type of organization, and this organization in particular, is a really good one to be able to incorporate volunteerism into a routine. So what are they? There used to be a very vibrant oyster population in in New York Harbor. And in less than 100 years, New York City managed to wipe out the entirety of the population of over 220,000 acres of oyster reefs in all of New York Harbor. And what the Billion Oyster Project is doing, they're a nonprofit organization that is working to restore those oyster populations. And so far, they've had over 11,000 volunteers that have helped them to work towards reaching their goals of adding 1 billion oysters back into the harbor. So why does this matter? Why should we care? So oysters are filter feeders, and what they do is they clean suspended solids and excess nutrients and algae, all these different types of things out of the water. And a single oyster can filter 50 gallons of water every single day. And that scales really, really quickly when thinking about having 220,000 acres of oysters doing all that work, 50 gallons per oyster per day. This prevents the buildup of excessive amounts of all of those things, all the suspended solids like nutrients like nitrogen and all these other fertilizer things that run off, fertilizer nutrients that run off into the water and can cause things like algae blooms and dead zones, stuff like that. So oyster reefs, kind of like their much more perhaps glamorous cousins, the coral reef, are also like a really, really big ecosystem and biodiversity hub. So they provide their structures and simply their existence provides habitat and food and a place for spawning protection for younger organisms and all these other life necessities. So we're just going to deal with the fact that we're in New York making podcasts. So they're super important to the ecosystem at large because of the things that they provide with their physicality. And they're really important. We're going to wait for this to go by. And they're really important for what services they provide by their biological functions of filter feeding. So this organization has very clear goals and has impacts that they can measure and regularly report on. And they have consistent messaging. And those are the types of things that are really, really important in identifying what kind of like organization that you would want to get involved with to support, because you pretty much know exactly what your efforts are and what exactly your contributions are begetting. So you can go and participate in projects like short term and, just come in and help do the day's work and that's it, and know that you've contributed to those greater goals. Or you can participate in like a longer term kind of capacity and know that your efforts within this organization are helping to achieve those goals on a longer term basis. It's more of like this is a thing that I do and that I work towards with this organization as something that I do. Organizations that you might want to keep your eyes on and be like a little bit more skeptical of are organizations that don't have super clear goals. They don't have a way to describe what their impact is because they're not capable of measuring it, something like that. and that their messaging is like super vague or uses buzzwords like sustainability or green, stuff like that, which is, in context can be specific, but if those are kind of like the only words that they're using in regards to how they're describing what they're doing, I would be skeptical, because what does that mean? Like, how are you making it green, quote unquote? And how are you improving sustainability? Without those things, I'd say move on. But the Billion Oyster Project and organizations like that are really, really great. So the second actionable thing that can be incorporated into your regular routine is in regards to politics. So politics in beyond just voting. So don't just vote and have that be your actionable thing that you did, because voting is super important and everyone should do this that can do it. But that's just one thing. And there's a lot of stuff that could be followed up after the act of voting. So getting specific with your expectations of politicians and getting familiar with what are the issues that are important with you. So first, I would say figure out the things that are important to you. And, whether that be emissions, whether that be biodiversity, whether that be endangered species, whether that be toxins that are being introduced into the environment, polluted areas of your city or town, things like that. So, like, figure out the thing that is important to you, and then find out who all of the people who represent your immediate location are, and all the different levels. So at the super local level, and then the city level, state level, federal levels, figure out who all of your people are. And then find out where they stand on your issue. So, go on their websites, learn what they have to say, if anything at all, about your issues, and then get involved. Spend time figuring out spend time figuring out the dates and the times that town halls are being held, so that you can participate in the process of accountability. So these will happen throughout the year at all the different levels, where you can get involved in going and hearing these politicians speak, ask them questions, and, in some of the videos that we've seen floating around the internet, hold publicly accountable and shame for inaction, or also celebrate the successes and, ask for more in regards to your subjects of interest, or the things that you care about. And then during the election cycles, look into the candidates and find out who are the candidates that have your subjects, your cares, your priorities in regards to the environment in mind. Who is speaking about and has a specific policy or a plan of action that will improve your subject, your issue. Whether it be a plan for reducing emissions, or it be a plan for reducing or eliminating the amount of toxins that are introduced into the environment, improving like infrastructure, whatever it is. Find what candidates have a plan to take action on your thing and go to the town halls and ask them questions about how specifically they're going to do it. Just get involved in the process beyond the vote. And also be wary of vagueness. Like if their positions and their stances on things are just, we need to do something about this. That's not enough. Well, what are you going to do? Ask them. Force them to have a plan, a policy, something that they're going to do. There's also organizations that environmental organizations that have politics and policies that they develop that they then bring to politicians to get behind and to support and incorporate into their policies and their plans for while they're in office. And one of the best ones ever is We Act for Environmental Justice. They're actually based out of Harlem in New York City. They have a federal office as well. And they do so much. And for example, one of the things that they do, one of their policy agendas that they have is providing more funding to the National Environmental Policy Act. So the NEPA requires public engagement for major infrastructure projects, kind of like we were just talking about. And what this does is it provides the opportunity for organizations, individuals, institutions to submit evidence of environmental inequities, evidence of damage being done to endangered or threatened species and their habitats, in the emissions, the impacts of emissions that will happen. So when there's significant infrastructure projects, this law provides the ability for us to participate in the process. So this policy agenda that they have supports our ability to participate in this process by providing more funding to it so that it can all be executed. And one of the other things that they do or have done and have as their as a policy agenda is they are one of the members behind the Renewable Rikers Coalition and the Renewable Rikers Act here in the city of New York. So there is not a lot of space in the city of New York, especially to install like significant renewable energy options of like a meaningful size. And what this does, or what it has done actually, is it has successfully started to happen, is that the Renewable Rikers Act that was a policy agenda of We Act for Environmental Justice for a long time. It relinquishes control of the prison on Rikers Island to the Department of Citywide Administration so that they can develop a renewable energy installation and water treatment facility to go there rather than a prison. And this will improve the overall quality and equity of the environment in the city as it decreases the city's reliance on importing fossil fuels into the city or burning them in the city to be able to produce electricity. So I believe the number is 13% is the amount of the trade-off. So introducing solar farms here will generate enough electricity for the city to decrease their carbon emissions by 13% by transitioning to a renewable instead. So I would say, in addition to all this other stuff regarding politics and specifically politicians, is that finding organizations as well that are focused on or have a policy agenda for your thing. So in WEAC's policy agendas are focused a lot on emissions and equity, environmental justice. I love WEACT. They've been really, really great. I've been following their work and participating in their work for a while now, and I can't say enough about them. So the next thing, which is probably the thing that you can incorporate into your routine the most regularly, and that is to get specific. So what do I mean by that? There's a lot of things to care about. There's lots of things to be concerned about. There are a lot of things happening that are really, really important in regards to the environment and the natural world, animals, plants, climate. There's a lot. But you are off the hook as an individual from being responsible from having an impact in all of them. So, like, think about it this way. The humans are very, very successful. And humanity is not successful because every single person is capable of doing every single thing. You know, we have specializations. We have people who have specific training and skills. So, like engineers, scientists, teachers, politicians, all different types of work, builders. We don't have to be good at all of those things for all those things to be able to happen. You know, like bridges, dams, like electricity, like all these things. You don't have to do all of them. You don't have to have the answers for all of them. You don't have to seek the answers for all of them. Again, it goes back to like picking your stuff. What are your things? What is your one big thing that you want to have at the core of your efforts to take actionable steps for improvement for the environment? Is it climate change policy via emissions? Is it mitigation of storm surges and flooding, coastal resilience? Is it protecting a specific animal? Is it advocating to protect a specific ecosystem, a specific, like a nature preserve, or establishing a nature preserve, or, you know, an area that once was and no longer is? Is it taking a long-term volunteer position for an organization that makes progress in your one big thing? You know, like decide what your big thing is that's the most important to you, and then start finding your avenues to be able to take smaller steps in all of these things, and volunteering, participating in the political processes, and do it all through this lens of what is your one big thing. Humanity, like I said, it's been super successful because of its diversity of specializations. So you just really need to have like your one thing that you're going to hone in your efforts for. You can care about everything, and obviously we should all care about everything, but like, what is the thing that you're going to make your focus be for your impact? And like a good example of tying all this stuff together, let's pick something like recycling. Recycling has a ton of issues that need to get figured out. So politicians and organizations, find the ones that have something to say about how to fix this. Volunteerism, that, you know, there's a lot of cleanup projects that happen. And as we know, there's lots of stuff that ends up in places it's not supposed to, like coastal cleanups. The Billion Oyster Project hosts a lot of coastal cleanups, and a lot of the material that ends up in the water is recyclable. And that is a way to do something on like a longer term scale, like go and do a coastal cleanup project every now and then, and make sure that the stuff gets to where it's supposed to go, so that the most of it can be recycled. As much of it that can be recycled is recycled, and you'll have, like your kind of pathway of like smaller things that you can do that are working towards this bigger thing, and having impacts on lots of different systems and stuff along the way. And like, pick your organization, maybe every couple of months you send them some money to help them, do the direct work that perhaps you don't have the bandwidth to do, but that's related to your thing, like let's say recycling. And poke your politicians, make sure they're doing what you want them to do. Show up to their stuff and tell them if they're not doing it. So yeah, I think that that's a really good way to start. And like the most important thing I would say is like, don't overcomplicate it. It doesn't have to be bigger than it is. Like making efforts and taking strides towards environmental improvement is a giant task, but it's full of tiny little things. It's full of tons and tons and tons of smaller things and smaller actions that people do. So like, keep in mind what you're doing is big and has big impacts, but it's not comprised entirely of giant monumental strides. It's a lot of really, really small actions that people decide to take. And for every one of those small actions that we don't decide to take, it's one less thing that happened to push us towards our goals, a better future, the improvements that we need. So find the stuff that speaks to you, and then make some small strides in these different kinds of ways whenever you can. Maybe it's a group event. Who knows? Anyway, I think that's a really good start. And while going through that process, more answers of what you can do will show up, because you'll be around a lot of people that are trying to do the same thing. So thank you so much, Gracie, for calling into the show. I'm really, really happy and excited to be making progress in this idea with this show. And I look forward to more and more questions. Remember, there's no questions that are too big or too small. Just like actions, there are no actions that are too big or too small. So call in to the show. And until next time, thank you again, Gracie. And thank you, everyone, for listening and for supporting the show. It means a lot. If you want to continue to support the show, please feel free to subscribe to all of my social media channels, and to follow the show on wherever you listen to your podcasts: Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, all of the places, and leaving reviews, leaving comments. All of that stuff, it really, really helps. It does make a difference, and it helps support the show. So thank you for doing all of that. And until next time, with another episode of Ryantist the Scientist, I will see you then. If you have questions that you would like to ask, call into the show. That phone number is 347-470-4144. Again, 347-470-4144. And remember, there are no questions that are too big or too small. Music for the show was created by Julian Giamma. I want to say thank you so much for working with me to create such a fun song, and thank you everyone for listening and for supporting the show. See you all again next week.